Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Mark, welcome to Consulting Leaders.
Thank you, Guillaume.
Let's jump straight into it. What got you into manufacturing consulting, Mark?
Can I start with what got me into manufacturing?
Sure.
That's probably the easiest thing.
Sure.
I grew up with a father who's an engineer. I grew up in a part of the UK called Liverpool at a time when things were pretty bleak. There were a lot of factories closing, late 70s, early 80s, lots of factories disappearing, which kind of sparked a bit of a question in my head. Why is the UK not great at keeping hold of businesses? Why have we suddenly started to lose these businesses that have been around for quite a while? I used to go past factories that had closed, and it wasn't uncommon to get a paper of an evening and find another factory had closed. And I had a really good physics teacher at school who took us, as we were doing our kind of what we call our A-levels to pre-degree qualifications. He took a number of us through electronics training. And one of the things he said to me was, I think you'd be really good at this, what was called production engineering stuff. And I ended up doing that at university. I ended up studying manufacturing at university. So how we make stuff, how we organize factories, how we need to work within union agreements and things, all kinds of different aspects of how do you run a factory, basically. And the Japanese stuff that I use these days that people are probably familiar with under the names of Lean or Six Sigma, and that hadn't really made it across to the Western shores even at that point. I was reading books that had only been published a year or two before. So I got into manufacturing. I studied it at university. I did some placements with different companies through that. And I stayed in manufacturing for around about 15 years. Various roles of running sites, so being a production team leader, production supervisor, manager, project manager, project engineer, right the way through to sort of site leadership. And then at some point, I started to look at what we call customer value. So there's a lot of talk in manufacturing and lean worlds about something called value add. And no one could ever answer it for me. To me, it was always based on what we charged them for. There was never any customer input. So I went and did a stint with a couple of marketing departments and really got under the skin of customer. And I think it was kind of the fourth time of being made redundant. I thought, I'm not having somebody else decide my fate for me because they've not been able to read a market or read a thing. So I've been made redundant a few times in different businesses. And I thought, right, that's what I can do. And I went into teaching lean and consulting on lean and improvement for a number of years. And I think the point at which I got into the diagnostics and leadership coaching was kind of the pandemic. We couldn't go on sites. We couldn't do anything on sites with people. And that was the point at which I sort of stepped back, looked at what had worked really well with clients, and where had it worked really well, and what had we adjusted and done. And it was kind of that thing. A lot of lean is sold off the back of a company wants to do something. It wants a package of improvement. And the reality is a lot of businesses don't actually know what they need. They don't actually know what they want. And this lean stuff is kind of, it's a package you can buy. So that's what people were buying. And I realized that we were dealing with people who didn't have leadership coaching. They hadn't been trained in how to lead stuff. They hadn't been trained in manufacturing. So they didn't know what they were actually dealing with and what their business model was. So it was kind of the pandemic that made me stop and take a step back and go, right, what is it I'm actually sell into the market, and where does it work.
And so what is that problem that you're solving now? What is it that you help people achieve?
So the problem I see a lot of is that manufacturing is complex. It encompasses the whole business. So if you think about taking in an order to delivery, that's actually the manufacturing cycle. It's not the stuff on the shop floor. By the time something gets to the shop floor to be made, it's normally too late for changes to be made and influences to be had. So it's that whole process from talking with the customer about what it is they want. And I'm talking about a lot of businesses where they're not making the same thing every time. They're making quite different things, or they're making small orders for people. So it's that kind of company I'm talking to. And it's that whole piece, and nobody's trained the manufacturing manager in how to deal with it. Nobody's trained the business in how to deal with it, in fact. So what it is getting hold of businesses like that and sort of talking them through what their models are, how they should be operating, what they should be doing. So that's the kind of the companies that I'm working with. And the problem I'm trying to solve is that managers are not trained in all of these complex bits. And then you get into, a lot of managers come up through the shop floor, and they're very good. The issue is they start to wear a whole heap of other hats. So they're responsible for safety, they're responsible for quality, they've got people management and returns to work and accidents to deal with. They've got to look at digital tools and AI that's coming along. They've got to look at capex and investments and operational costs and all of these things that are coming at them, and third-party relationships and suppliers and loads of stuff, and nobody's ever told them how to do it. Nobody's ever guided them through. So they're kind of lost a lot of the time.
So it's helping guide the people who are actually do the manufacturing in the plants.
Yes. Yeah. It starts with them. It can go in different ways, but it absolutely starts with the guys in there as the production leads. How do I help you get this thing moving as quickly as possible? And sometimes that takes us into other departments and other aspects of the business to help them. But in that first bit, it's how do I help you get more out of your plant?
I like to ask the question here. Talk to me like I'm the CEO of that company that you're working with. And how does that, that's great. I want my people on the floor to do better, but how does that impact my bottom line?
Okay, that's a really good question, because it's one that improvement people don't really answer. We talk about saving time and we talk about waste, but we never really quantify it. The reality is, unless you can reduce the amount of work in progress, so you're reducing the funding that the business needs, or you can get more out, there aren't really many other levers you can pull. And a lot of time when people say, oh, I've saved X amount of time, it hasn't come through in the bottom line. So what I'm looking for is I'm always looking for, how do I get more out of this business? How do I increase the throughput? So if I'm doing 10 units this week, how do I get it to 11, 12, 13, 14? What's that? In the same time, so if it's a 10 a week, how do I get it to 12, 13, 14 a week? And what does that look like for you as a business? So kind of I'm working on kind of gross margin impact, because I don't know what you're going to do with the remainder of the business. But if the same business can make the same amount of product, can make 14 units versus 10, then those 4 extra units are 4 extra units that should just take in the cost of materials, because I've already got the people there, and I've already got the support mechanisms and all the other support costs and business costs that go around me. So kind of, I have a little calculation, which is it works to about, for every hour of extra output I can get from a factory, so not a department, not a team, not an individual, but a factory, it's worth about 17.5 to 20,000 pound per £1 million of turnover. So that's kind of where we're going. And if you think, if you're in a £5 million business, it's £100,000, but it's £100,000 multiplied by how many years you now go forward and do this. So
pretty solid business case.
And that's kind of the minimum, if you like. That's the minimum I'll go for. So that's 1 hour. If I can find 5 hours, if I can find a day, which I can do in quite a lot of businesses, we're looking at 8 hours. So it's 8 times that. So it's £800,000.
So the business case is pretty straightforward. You present that to anybody, they'll be like, sign me up. Who is it that you target, Mark? Like, who is it that you work with specifically? Do you have a specific industry, niche, marketing size, company size? How do you decide who you work with?
For myself, it's the market. The manufacturing can be any manufacturing business. There are some that are I know I'm going to walk into and see things straight away that are going to be really useful. So anybody that does any form of assembly work or multiple stage machining work, so you've got a set of different machines and you move a material through it, and it doesn't have to be connected by conveyors or anything, it's just you moving it through. Where there's an assembly process, there'll be stuff that needs to be sorted through. Where you bring in a raw material in, put it on one machine, doing one act to it and then shipping it out, there are still things I can do, but they're different things to the other two models. So that's the thing that I like to get to understand, is what's your business model. So they're the businesses I work really well with, we can have a real impact with. Businesses where there's multi-stage production, if you like, or manufacturing. The size of the business, that's a really interesting question, because everyone focuses on the size, but I can go into, when I go to large businesses, they're normally multiple sites, and each site will have its own signature operation, and each site will have its own, although it might have a finance report or a business report that it sends up to head office, actually when you start looking at it, it will operate in its own individual way. So even for larger businesses, it's actually the site level I'm working at with them. So typical size can be anything between 5 million and 150 million. Once you're getting above that, you're kind of into very large sites, and they do exist, but it's kind of in that realm there. So the manufacturing, what they make, doesn't make too much of a difference to me. I've got an engineering background, so I can understand a lot of the engineering principles that are involved with different aspects. And I've worked for a lot of companies. My range is, I've done everything from chilled foods, which is about the most fast-paced production environment anywhere. You get an order in today, it needs to be on a lorry tomorrow, and that's it. There's no messing about. There's the lead time is what it is. It can be as short as sort of 5 or 6 hours, versus working on making machines that have been 3 months in design, and have 25,000 moving parts on them, or wind turbine projects where we're manufacturing the towers that go in the North Sea. So we're trying to work through all of that. So what they do is kind of less important to me, because I can get to the business model, the operational model that underpins it all.
Who makes the decision of hiring you, Mark? Because I'm going to suspect this is not the manufacturer or the engineer walking on the floor, right? So who do you need to talk to start a project?
The people that normally talk to are going to be, there'll be business owners, CEOs, MDs, finance directors, with input from operational people. So the operational people, it can be sometimes that the CEO, MD, finance director needs something, that they need a review doing to tell them what needs to be done. And in some cases, they're mindful that their operational teams may not be managing the plants properly. At other times, the operational team are part of that, and they're saying, we don't know what to do. We need some help with it. So it's kind of collection of all three. Any one of them can pick up the phone, but normally it's the guys at the very top of that leadership plant who make the decision.
That does make sense. So how do you, I mean, what has worked for you marketing wise to get in touch with those CEOs, founders, finance directors, so that you can say, hey, I can save you £800,000 a day? Like, how do you do that?
The main thing that I use these days is LinkedIn. So I share a lot of insights on LinkedIn, regular stuff for people to see. And that sort of generates enough into what I can cope with. So that's the main thing. I've spent a reasonable amount of time understanding how Google works. So my Google searches are pretty locked in. I'm keeping an eye on AI searches and how that may help, and how AI tools are bringing in other content from people, because I think that's something to be wary of, and to kind of embrace in the future. But mostly it's through LinkedIn, and then it'll be referrals and if you like. So you guys got me through a post that I put out on LinkedIn. So when podcasts and events come to me, I look at whether they're going to be useful for what I'm trying to deliver. So I do events as well across the UK with sometimes it's with a regional manufacturing group representing lots of manufacturing types. Sometimes it's with a trade body, so it might be a specific group of manufacturers who do one type of work and they're in a trade body, and I'll go and speak to them.
I like that. So can you break down for us a bit the funnel on like how you make LinkedIn work, in the sense of like, how do you think about content? How do you come up with content? But then how do you go from LinkedIn, right, to a potential lead, a qualified lead, a sales conversation, and so on? Like, what does the funnel actually look like for the people listening to us who want to learn from that and potentially try and do it themselves?
So the funnel is how I think about content is what is kind of primarily what did I find is not right in manufacturing businesses. So anything I write is based on observation. So there are a whole heap of things that I see in organizations all the time. So my main introductory product is a factory review, and that factory review gives people an action plan of what to do. Sometimes that isn't stuff that's in my remit. So I'll give you an example. I did one a few months ago where I said there are things we can do about improving your performance, but actually we need a conversation about how you're going to let people retire, because you've got an aged workforce who are over the age of retirement, who we haven't got, there is no plan. And actually we can come and improve things, but the biggest risk is that these guys are going to leave within a year or two, and there is no plan written down on how you're going to lose them and let them leave in a managed way. So my main product is the factory review, and when I'm doing the factory review, I pick up lots of things that I can then share with people about what goes on and how people are managing, which resonates with leaders in businesses. They see the same things, so they will put a comment, a like, they'll be following me on there. So I know that's kind of an easy thing. When somebody puts a comment or a like, it's easy to go in and have a DM and ask them what resonated about what you've put up there. With other people, I'll put a message out saying that I've got these reviews. This is typically what we find. How do you find these things are working in your business? So it's questioning style really with the DMs through LinkedIn. And once I start to get a conversation, and it depends what answer they give me as to what we go back with. And then it will be a question of, when I think they're ready, do we want to have a conversation on like we're having now, a conversation over Teams? You can share with me your insights, what's going on, what the challenges you've got, what you're thinking, and I'll give you some insights as to what I think what could be done with it. And from that's where we take it into the review. So the aim of the review is to try and make it easier for businesses to engage with me. So they're not having to justify a great big improvement program or a great big slug of money to do a whole heap of things that they're not quite sure about. The review is, I'll come in and look at your business and I will give you my best ideas, not only what to do, but in what order to do them and what the impact will be on your business if you do these things, so that you get a full report that you can take away and go, right, that's what we're now looking at. So I've tried to I've tried to de-risk it for people, that this is not, I'm not going to tie you into 20 days or 30 days work. It's dependent on the size. The review takes between 1 and 3 days on site, and then the rest of it is the writing up.
Yeah. How do you retain after that, Mark? Especially for your business model, like, hey, you find out what the savings are, how to optimize, how to get agents more productive, basically, and then the saving is found, right? How do you retain? How do you transform one engagement into another and into another and into another?
With a lot of this, what people are actually asking for is they don't know how to implement it. So they may have tried some of this improvement stuff before as well, and it hasn't worked. So there is the implementation stage. So even though I might say to them, you need to implement, so let's say we find a bottleneck, and it's right, we need to implement a system to make sure that bottleneck never stops. They're easy words to say, but I know I need to unpick why the bottleneck is stopping, why the work doesn't get managed, how we're going to maximize the throughput of that bottleneck, which will get us the improvement. So that's the bit that they haven't got and they're kind of frightened about, is the implementation. So that's where the next stage comes from, is the implementation. But it like I say, it does depend. So the client where I found that we needed to get people a pathway out and a recruitment plan, I had to hand that over to their HR function and their HR advisors, because it was like, look, there's no point in me. I can do lots of improvement, but unless we get the right people in place, this is not going to work. So kind of have to hand it over to them for a while and then go back in and work with the new hires on what they were going to do and how we were going to develop them. But as you're working through, once you've worked through one problem and you've got that working and you've got extra time and extra work coming through, what you normally do is you start to, if there's a backlog in the business, you start to clear the backlog. And once you start doing that, you start to end up with free time. So it's helping the business organize that free time. So it's things like, right, now we can do a training plan for people. And they probably have never done a training plan and improving people's skills. So it's like, right, let's work through how we're going to improve people's skills. Let's go back to the marketing and the sales team and talk to them about what actually is the production capability of the business, and what else could we do with this free time that we've now created? What other products should you be pushing? And should you be looking for? Because actually, if we create free time for you and you put the wrong products in, we're going to be back where we started very, very quickly. So let's work through what you're going to try and fill the free time with. I think before, when I said if we go from 10 machines a week to 14, what those 4 are can be quite important, and quite important for the business. And sometimes it offers them an opportunity to do things that they never thought possible. So it might be that those 4 machines actually turn out to be 2 very large things, or 2 very large orders that before they'd never looked at. So the engagement can be quite large. I think the longest engagement I've had with somebody is still ongoing. It's 7 years. I'm not there every week. I'm not there every month. Sometimes it's, 6-8 months between project bits that we do. You've got to let a business catch up. It can't do everything straight away. So the way we handle that is keep in contact with them.
That does make sense to me. I'm going to throw a little bit of a curveball question at you, Mark, to kind of wrap up this interview. What's your number one challenge right now? What's the one nut that you're trying to crack that once you crack, you're going to take the whole thing to the next level, what would that be for you?
This is kind of it's a good question. And the biggest opportunity isn't for me. The biggest opportunity is for organizations. So right now we have a set of kind of accepted accounting financial practices that measure businesses in the same way. So, and I get that they're there for a reason. They're there so that investors can know whether they're making money and whether they're getting the right things. The reality for somebody like me is that those measurements are not really great at understanding whether the business is performing or not, and whether the operational side is performing or not. So, for example, if I'm measuring the direct labor time on a part, which a lot of businesses try and do, within there is a whole heap of time where somebody's looking for the work, they're looking for materials, they're checking an order through, they're looking for tools, they're moving stuff around. So there's a whole heap of time where they're not actually doing anything to the piece of work, but the financial system is blind to it. The other bit is that we get fixated on kind of economic work. So we end up with people making batches. And I might go into a client and be looking at something and thinking, right, I can, we're making 5 of something, which takes us all day on this machine. And I ask the question, right, how many of those do I need to fulfill this week's orders? Oh, we only need 1. Right. But I've just tied up that machine for a day making things that I haven't sold. I need to get you back to only making what you can sell. Which is kind of, it doesn't fit with the economic models that we have at the moment and the kind of the financial models that people use. But the reality is, if I can free up sort of 4 or 5 hours on that machine, that might be the thing that takes you further forward faster and gets your orders out on time and gets the money cycling back into the business. So for me, the biggest thing is the idea of how do I get more through? I don't think there's a business that really ever publishes its cycle time from start to finish. So from the moment we take in an order to the moment we ship it out, what is that time? We don't really, it's not part of our financial figures, but actually it's the bit that tells us how fast we're spinning. We try and measure stock and WIP and all those things, but actually I started an order on Monday. Did I finish it on Friday? And I'll go into businesses and we'll look through a bill of materials, or we'll talk to somebody and they'll say, oh yeah, there's 40 hours in that order. So there's 40 hours of work in that order. I think I saw one in December that was 25 hours work on the shop floor. It took 6 weeks. So 6 weeks, 40 hours a week, 240 hours, but there was only 25 hours work on the job. It's like that should have been done. That could have been done in a day. So for me, it's kind of the biggest thing that I know is to get other people to see this and to get people outside of manufacturing and outside of production floor to see this. When people start to get that will be the kind of industry thing that I know we're getting somewhere, that we have these different ways of measuring that are equally valid, just depending on what you're after the answer for. For myself, it's kind of getting people to see that they've got different businesses, different business models. That we have programs over here in the UK that show factories, and what they tend to show are factories with nice white walls, people wearing hairnets, and lots of conveyors and things moving around. That isn't manufacturing. Manufacturing is much more complex than that, and it's much more varied and much more interesting than running machines with conveyors between them. So if I can get people to see that, that'll be my own personal challenge.
So educating the markets, educating the decision makers, basically, of the value that there is into investing in that.
Yeah, there's free cash sitting in their business. You know, I said to you before, if I can find 1 hour of extra output on £1 million turnover business, I think it's worth £20,000 on gross margin. But that's 1 hour. If I've got a £5 million business and I save 1 hour, I get 1 extra hour of output, it's probably worth £100,000. But if I can find 8 hours, it's £800,000. So it's scalable because I'm focused on the factory output, and it's free money. That's the other thing. And it's the challenge is also that if you can get more out of your factory, not out of a department or a person, or like a lot of people will talk about saving hours in different ways. If I can get an extra hour of output, the other challenge I start to overcome is the lack of skills or the lack of people that a lot of manufacturing companies are facing at the moment. So I can start to deal with that. So it's kind of free. It's free money that's just sat there at the moment. It's quite. It is there if you can see it, but I think that's where our financial reporting doesn't see it. And I understand why, but we need a different type for operational areas.
Mark Greenhouse, ladies and gentlemen. Mark, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
Like we've discussed, the best place is LinkedIn. That's where I'm mostly available. I've got a website. It's levantar.co.uk. But if people want to get me, I'm on LinkedIn. Send me a request, and read what I write. And if it hits, if it sparks some questions, if it makes you think, great.
We'll put all the links in the description. Mark, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time. How was that, Mark?